For those of you that were here yesterday downstairs for the produce safety talk, this is the same talk. So if you've already heard it, I'm not offended if you get up and leave. I am Heather Branvold. I'm the assistant state vet here in Alaska, and I'm also the produce safety program manager. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our produce safety program, along with the produce safety rule, which was adopted in 2015 by the USDA, or sorry, by FDA, as part of FSMA, which is the Food Safety Modernization Act. So the question then is, why do we care about produce safety or food safety in general? Why did the FDA even implement this produce safety rule? The reason is foodborne illnesses. There's about 48 million foodborne illnesses per year estimated by the CDC, and almost half of those are attributed to produce. And there's around 3,000 deaths each year, estimated again by the CDC, and around a quarter of those are attributed to produce. So it is a pretty big deal. And so the produce safety rule, I think that skipped a.
Oh, yeah, it did.
Okay, sorry, I'm like, wait a minute. There we go. Sorry, this is a touchy clicker. The produce safety rule was implemented in 2015. Prior to this, there was no regulation regarding the safety of produce. This is the first mandatory regulation, or first mandatory federal standard for produce. And the focus of this rule is on prevention of foodborne illnesses. So the intent is to be proactive and not just reactive.
I'm so happy to just do it for you.
There.
If you want.
I'll figure it out. By the end of the presentation, I'll figure out the clicker. So what types of produce are covered by the produce safety rule or the PSR? Not all produce is covered. So anything that tends to be eaten raw, like your lettuces, most fruits, tree nuts like almonds or mushrooms, those are covered by the produce safety rule. So generally it's anything that's generally eaten raw. So produce that's exempt from the produce safety rule are things that are not generally eaten raw, like potatoes or beets or asparagus. So generally if you cook it routinely, that's the main way you eat it, it's not covered by the rule. Produce also that's meant for personal or on-farm consumption, like your home garden, that is also not covered by this rule. As well as produce that's destined for processing to kill pathogens. Like if you're making, you're sending all your produce, all your tomatoes to go make tomato sauce, that's a kill step. So that's to kill pathogens. So that produce can be exempt from the rule as well. And so now that you know what produce is covered, the question is who is covered or what farms are covered. And there are three categories for the produce safety rule. Those that are exempt, qualified exempt, and fully covered. The vast majority of farms here in Alaska are either exempt or qualified exempt. But even if you're not fully covered by the rule, these are good guidelines to follow, good practices for all farms to follow these rules to help prevent any foodborne illnesses from your farm. The categories, so exempt, these farms are making less than $25,000 a year in produce sales. This should be adjusted for inflation though. So it's definitely a much higher number really than that. I think we said it was about $3,800 maybe was the last estimate. So so you do need to adjust those numbers for inflation. And same with anything that's got an asterisk on there, it'll be adjusted for inflation. So, but yeah, so if you're making less than $25,000 a year in produce sales, you are exempt from this rule. Qualified exempt are those that are making more than $25,000 in produce, but less than $500,000 in general food sales. And that includes meat, eggs, non-covered produce like your potatoes, dry goods on your shelves, etc. So that all counts as food sales. So if you're making less than $500,000 in food sales, more than 25,000 in produce sales. And one more requirement is the majority of your produce must be sold to something called a qualified end user. Qualified end users are basically your general customers at farmers markets, restaurants, online sales, grocery stores. Anybody that's not a wholesaler or distributor is considered a qualified end user. So those are going to be your 3 requirements for qualified exempt. And then fully covered farms are those making greater than $25,000 in produce sales, plus either greater than $500,000 in food sales, or selling the bulk of their produce to a qualified end user. So farms, we do have several farms here in Alaska that are considered qualified exempt. Those farms do have 2 requirements they must follow for the produce safety rule. They are basically providing the name of their farm and the address so that we know where the food is coming from at the point of sale. So either a placard at your farmer's market or on an invoice or on your packaging, something that identifies that this food comes from your farm. And you also need to keep records for 3 years, and that just helps to maintain or determine your qualified exempt status. So, and by records, I mean your produce sales records or invoices. So produce safety benefits everyone. Food safety benefits everyone. Again, even if you are exempt or qualified exempt, which the majority of you probably are, it is still good practice for you guys to follow the produce safety rule. It can help you to prevent foodborne illnesses that may stem from your farm. So now I'll talk a little bit about the produce safety rule itself. I'm just going to kind of cover the general requirements for everything, or the general overview of everything. At the end, I will talk about more in-depth training that we can offer if you want to know more specifics about each of these sections of the produce safety rule. But they are worker health hygiene, water, soil amendments, animals and land use, and then post-harvest handling and sanitation. Those are the general sections for the produce safety rule. So worker health and hygiene is the first element of the produce safety rule. And this is basically knowing your routes of potential contamination. Things like your hands, your footwear, your tools that you're using, your clothing, those can all be potential sources of a contamination. So it talks about that and how to learn how to prevent contamination to decrease any chances of foodborne illnesses. Things, you know, like proper hand washing, using soap can really, really make a difference. This section also covers worker injury and illnesses, you know, understanding that you probably shouldn't be harvesting food or out there picking the produce when you're having vomiting and diarrhea. You know, that's not good practice. We don't want to spread any diseases. So, and then it covers other things like having toilet facilities available for your workers, hand washing facilities, among others.
But that's it on the facilities, it doesn't, the facilities don't cover, that, area where you wash your crop, and then this poultry, and that.
So this particular section only covers worker health and hygiene. There are the post-harvest handling section talks more about, you know, sanitation of surfaces when you're harvesting. So, but yeah. And then soil amendments are another section of the produce safety rule. These definitely can be a source of contamination, especially those of animal origin, like manure. The produce safety rule does not prohibit using amendments like manure or raw manure. The goal is, though, for you to know what you're actually applying, know the risks of what you're applying, and that can help you determine the best practices on when and how to apply. If you're applying raw manure, you probably don't want to apply it the day before harvest. So things like that. And then water is similar to soil amendments. There's three main sources of water. your surface water, which is more likely to have contamination than your groundwater, which are like wells, which is more likely than using municipal water. But it goes into detail about the water and any testing requirements that you need to do for water. But it's similar to soil amendments in that if you know your water source, you know the risk, and that can help you with your best practices of how and when to apply it. And then animals and land use, domestic and wild animals are a potential source of contamination as well. And knowing signs of animal intrusion and implementing practices to help you reduce that animal intrusion can help decrease any risks of foodborne illnesses, using things like decoys or visual and noise deterrents, falconry, etc. can all help. Well, and fences can help reduce your risk of animal intrusion. Keeping pets and livestock away from your produce is also good practice. You're definitely not prohibited from having pets and livestock, but it's a good idea to keep them away from the produce that you're harvesting. Most of our farms here in Alaska are, multi-use, multi-purpose farms. So we do see a lot of, produce growers that have livestock. And then also knowing what produce to harvest. If you find produce with bird droppings on it, you shouldn't harvest it. It should just stay in the field. So it goes a little more in depth about that kind of thing as well. Post-harvest handling and sanitation is the last section of the produce safety rule. And this discusses, again, the importance of worker training in not harvesting that bird poop, the tomato with all the bird poop all over it, not harvesting the apples that have fallen to the ground and so forth. So, and also, things such as cleaning and sanitizing your work surfaces, your packing houses, where you're processing your produce. You want to make sure that it's clean and sanitized. And I also want to make sure that there's no pests in there. You need to have some sort of pest management program. If there's mice and voles all over with droppings everywhere in your packing house, or birds up in the rafters nesting and pooping on things, not terribly sanitary and definitely a source or potential source of contamination. So that is a very, very brief overview of the produce safety rule. And so now I'll talk a little bit on how the Alaska Produce Safety Program can benefit you and your farm. This is a collaborative effort with the UAF Co-op Extension, and we get federal funding from the FDA for this. We offer educational opportunities, grower trainings, which are where we cover the rule more on-farm educational visits, which is almost like a pre-inspection. We can go around and help you determine, some areas of concern in your farm. And we also do inspections for those fully covered farms as required by the FDA. So our grower trainings are a great opportunity for you guys to learn more about produce safety for you and all your workers. It goes into much more detail on the things you can do to help prevent contamination of your produce. And it is a requirement for those fully covered farms to have at least one person take a grower training or an equivalent type training. It's not a requirement, obviously, if you're exempt or qualified exempt. However, it is a great idea and recommended for all farms and all workers to attend a grower training. It's open to everyone. It's free. We offer a 2-day virtual course or a full day in-person course. Yeah, and we do have one grower training coming up in Juneau here at the end of this month, because it's February now. So, right? Yes.
Yeah.
At the end of this month, we have a grower training in Juneau, and we're planning on putting together one for either Anchorage or Matsu sometime this spring. But if there's enough interest, we can get a virtual one going up here, or potentially even an in-person one if we have enough interest. So Oh, and that's our email address. If you guys are interested in a grower training, you can come see me or Dr. Sarah Coburn after the presentation. And we can kind of set you up or let you know what you need to do. Or if you don't want to come talk to us, our produce safety at alaska.gov. That's one of our program coordinators' email, and she can get back to you on how to schedule that. And then the educational farm visits that we do are, again, it's basically a pre-inspection. These are not required in any way, shape, or form, whether you're fully covered or not. But they are also a great idea. They are also free for everybody. So, but it is a non-regulatory inspection. It's basically a pre-inspection and it'll help you identify more specific risks tailored to your farm specifically. You have very specific questions, and then it can kind of help you determine what areas can be improved and what you can do to improve the safety. And again, it's free. So we recommend it for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're a really, really small farm or a fully covered farm. They're free and open to everyone. So that is a brief overview of the produce safety program and the produce safety rule. Kind of in summary, food safety is very important for everyone. Produce safety is important for everyone. It affects everyone. There's several ways to identify and reduce your risks of foodborne illnesses that can come from your farm. And then we are here for assistance. We're the government. We're here to help you. But please don't hesitate to email or call or come find us after the program if you're interested in anything or have any questions. So, and that went really fast because I talked really fast. I apologize. But I do have another little presentation if anyone wants to sit and hear it on, oh, shoot. Here's the produce safety email address again. And this is our produce safety group. Dr. Coburn, Dina and Robin are instrumental in organizing everything. They're fabulous. So. Does anybody have any specific produce questions or produce
I
safety?
want to add really quickly too, I didn't think about this yesterday, but for that coverage categories for farms, so we do about once a year, we send out a mailer to farms that are either listed from farmers markets or just other contacts we've had with people that have attended grower trainings in the past. So if you get a random envelope in the mail from DEC and it's like, hey, it's produce safety stuff. That's what it is. It's basically trying to find if there's anybody that has transitioned into that larger farm category and is required to have an inspection. It's kind of to make sure like, hey, check back in with us and let us know, and we'll make sure you have what you need for that. If you're in those other categories I think we've been doing a kind of a postcard that you can stick in an envelope. It's pre-addressed. If you just say, nope, I'm in that qualified exempt category, direct sales, we're under whatever amount. And just send it back. But that's what that is. I know sometimes people are like, why am I getting something from you guys? But that's about once a year. You might, we're sending them out about once a year and trying to check in with people every couple of years for each category. So anyway, that's what that is. I thought about after the fact yesterday, like, I probably should let people know, like, and then sending a little bit of a newsletter with what's happening or trainings that are coming up. So.
I had a question. It may not be produce, but for instance, if I'm gonna do rabbits and stuff, don't they have a vet or somebody that can say what procedures you need to do in order to sell meat?
So for meat sales, our office, DEC actually doesn't have we don't have any state meat inspection programs. So there's kind of different categories of things, and actually interesting you say rabbits. So for other meat, other than rabbits, if you want to sell your burger or whatever in a restaurant, it does need to be under USDA inspection. So it just needs to be at a facility has a USDA inspector.
Okay.
If it's rabbits are in a weird category where they're not an amenable species, so they're not under USDA inspection. They're under FDA good guidelines or something, but FDA is not actually checking anything. But still, if you want to sell to a restaurant or a store, I'm pretty sure those would still need to be under USDA inspection, but you would have to pay for that inspection. So you'd have to have a plant that's willing to deal with rabbits, and you would have to pay for the inspector to do the inspections of the rabbits.
So I couldn't dress out the rabbit myself and sell it on the farm market?
I don't believe so, but I feel like I want you to check with USDA and make sure, or with food safety. If you know the DEC office here, Lorinda Laka is the main manager here, I would check with her and see where rabbits fall. Because
Okay.
poultry has very specific things and the beef and other things, and then rabbits are kind of this.
Well,
Little
poultry and
category.
rabbit should fall in the same category because it's a meat product.
Well, there's a whole poultry inspection act from 100 years ago in federal law, but
The milk rabbit.
not for rabbits. So they are a non-amenable species and they kind of fall under a different category.
What about ostrich?
Ostrich
Yeah.
is under poultry, yeah. But check with Lorinda. Yeah,
And she's at DEC?
yeah, she's the DEC office on University Avenue. Next to Oasis, the.
Okay,
Well,
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think rabbits are a great option because feed conversion rate, I mean, they get to a market weight quickly. There's a lot of things I think the smaller scale livestock do really well up here. Broiler birds and things where people can, there's exemptions for like under 1,500 birds you can do without dealing with inspection that you can process yourself, so.
Yeah, we get a lot of people, two out there, a lot of people want to grow their own rabbits and stuff, so we're looking at that as a market. When you see, you get more people want to grow, then maybe they can start moving to, if they go more, if you can market.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
that's just a procedure. They used to have one that said, hey, you could only, the rabbit never could hit the ground. But then when you got to the slaughterhouse, then you had to pay $2, for the inspector to inspect it. I'm like, Jesus Christ, my car is about $2 per rabbit.
right.
But, yeah, okay, I'll check with her, but I'll try to find somebody to give me the answer.
Yeah,
And I can pass it on, and see what we get.
Lorinda's been around a long time, she knows.
Yeah, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just curious if you guys have ever come across any jurisdictional issues with any of the Alaskan tribes. I know that they're trying to start some community gardens. There's a few that already have them. I know that they're probably not quite at this, at a level that would make it there, but that's where they would like to be. And I guess just curious where lines cross and who gets to,
Yeah.
regulate all of that.
So this has been an interesting conversation. Mostly we're in contact with other western states for different regulatory programs. My understanding, at least in Washington and Oregon, if it is a tribal lands, if it is reservation land, then it is FDA. They do not want the states doing those inspections for those larger farms. Up here, we don't have, except for Metlakatla, right? So far, we've not had any issues, like we've had, I think Kotzebue was looking at getting some, hydroponic units, so they paid for a couple of their folks to come down for a training. We worked with, somebody out in the Aleutians. So we've had quite a few people that have kind of been interested and have just come just for good, kind of baseline produce safety information. Some of the restaurants, or not restaurants, the, hospitals, I want to say Kotzebue again, maybe, they wanted to do some local produce in their hospital facilities, and they did ask them, even though they weren't covered, they asked for a food safety plan. They wanted some kind of assurance that, they were doing some good things, appropriate practices before they brought it into their facilities. So we did work with them, kind of reviewing food safety plan and make sure, but there was no audit, there was no, any on-site inspection. So far we've had kind of just conversations and I'm not sure some of the units that they got up and going, but I'd love to see it. It's just water and electricity are expensive, so otherwise they're awesome for rural communities, but
That's
It's a
another question
challenge,
that
too.
pops up in, hydroponics and stuff. Dealing with, the rabbit waste. Use the rabbit waste, you can put it right on the crop, on the ground and stuff. Unlike chicken where you can use a tea and stuff. But if you're doing hydroponics, and you turn it to a tea, would that be a contaminant as well for?
in a hydroponic system, I would be very reluctant to use manure-based, just because the way that most of the systems I've seen anyway are set up, it's recycled water. If there is dripping, it drips right onto the tray beneath them. So if you have any, in theory, you're not dripping from the top layer to the next layer, but it definitely happens, or you have your emitters. So if you actually had animal waste, unless it was treated, which you can do, there's different composting things, but it needs to be like one every other temp, like whatever temperature for a certain period of time in turn, and then if it's covered and prevent contaminations potentially.
Avoid this.
Yeah, if it really
carried
was
away
truly
with
treated and
pictures.
documented.
That's great.
That was
Trying to
treated,
get
that
it
might
all
be
great.
different.
2 hours worth.
But I don't know any hydroponic folks that are using
And I even did it in
animal
PDF too.
waste.
Oh, nice.
In case we need
Amendments
to
for
go.
their, yeah, and I don't know, they tend to be
Because I
so
use
dialed in
Make sure
and
it's
like
not-
really controlled that it might be a little bit hard to get that level of,
I
Yeah, so,
stored
you
it as a
know,
PowerPoint.
most organic type stuff.
Let's try
you gotta
PowerPoint
get
and
rid
then
of all
if
this
that's here,
chemical
we'll
based
do,
fertilizer.
we'll do.
So if you gotta get rid of chemical type fertilizer,
Then
then
I'm
you have to
recording
go through.
I am,
Something
but you're.
something
you got
else,
that
yeah,
idea?
yeah.
No, no, I would,
Yeah.
Okay.
I would rather you too.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, I don't know, the hydroponic
My-
stuff's
my
pretty
first
cool
talk.
for the amount, volume of production you can get with a really small
And then,
footprint. It's
yeah.
pretty.
Plus, they do same thing with fish.
Where you
Yeah.
upload it to.
Yeah, we were talking to some colleagues
I
in
think
Hawaii recently, and they've got a lot of fish, aquaponics.
Aquaponics, yes.
We also
Yeah,
have the.
yeah,
So
that's
that's
a very
similar,
common.
you know, waste.
It is, yeah, and fish are a little bit different because they don't
We
carry
haven't
some of the
settled on
pathogens that our
anything,
animal species
but-
carry for salmonella and things like that. The only fish aquaponics one that's happened, they think it was contamination from people
Okay.
bringing it in, not from the
Yeah,
fish themselves.
just either be.
And that thing is, you do training for the personnel that's working,
Thank
and you have a class that you
Mm-hmm.
can do
This looks like
virtual.
Yeah,
Can you do it on an individual basis, or you just have to have a certain amount of
See
people?
if this.
it's a pretty intensive, I mean, it's like the in-person, it's 8 hours. And it's like standardized curriculum from Cornell University that they got funding from US or from FDA to develop that curriculum. So we have to teach it in a very specific way.
Mhm.
With all the same information. So to do that for one
There
person,
we go.
I think would be painful for that one person.
Okay.
But as far as like just kind of consulting or talking about things or helping get resources, we're always happy to do that.
Yeah, cause I'm also, I'm president of the Grange, so we're trying to get a community garden going, so we now got about 25 people eventually. So we're looking at, if we need a class going, perhaps, we're also looking at the new Zoom type deal. If we have a certain amount of people that can attend Zoom, because we live there for a time.
Yeah.
So to go to Juneau, that's not gonna happen.
Right.
So,
Right.
so.
That works
we're
too, but
gonna
it's probably better to just
town,
use,
the logo and
yeah,
do-
because that thing, like.
And we, I mean,
These
before
are so
2020, they were all
controlled
in-person
now, so it's like-
classes. We just wanted at least 5 people. And we had anywhere from 5 to 25 people that would come. And then, now that we're able to do it virtually, our in-person classes, we've had a hard time getting much in-person attendance, but we're still getting 20 or 25 people virtually.
Okay,
And the nice thing sometimes with the virtual classes is we have people in Nome and we have people in Juneau and we have people, so they kind of like to hear what things are happening in other parts of the state or what some of the practices are for people in the other parts of the state or. So it's been kind of fun. The Zooms worked out pretty well. But we'll see. Or if you do have a group of people and like, hey, we have 30 people that are part of this garden and we have, kind of 3 or 4 that are the main
Oh.
managers and a
I
few
can
other
go on
people
all
that want to
Yeah, I
kind
was
of be
gonna
involved in
say.
the food safety, we could set something up just for your group too.
Yeah, cause it's quite a bit.
Yeah,
okay. But also,
Yeah.
with the food bank side of the house, well, and if we do the garden, some of that stuff will be not being issued out, that too much stuff is given to the food bank. So that's why I'm looking at, we need to make sure that we give them the clean things to the food bank.
Yes, and actually more of the donation type facilities, a lot of them, because there have been some very significant outbreaks in shelters for unhomed people and things that, I mean, man, that is really bad situation. There was a really bad one, I think, in Denver a couple of years ago. But anyway, so they're starting to have kind of higher standards for food safety too. And that might apply to produce, but even having somebody say like, yeah, we did go this course and we, have these practices in place. I think goes a long way. Even having something as simple, we did a, kind of a series of workshops with Kodiak with their, Lute Grown group, and kind of at the end of that, what they came away with is they got a grant for just mobile hand wash stations at each of their facilities, because none of them had, like, you had to walk, who knows where to go use the bathroom, and so it was basically hand washing and some signage about what was expected, you know, keeping pets out, hand washing, and like where the bathroom facility, simple thing, but they were like, oh, I hadn't even thought about it, just
Right.
something that simple, that if it's not convenient to wash your hands, people won't do it. It's human nature, but, that was a nice thing that came out of that.
You guys ready?
That's a good
So
thought.
it sounds like they just finished downstairs, so if we wanna give maybe just one more minute, so
No
people
problem.
can come up. Or-
I'll talk.
I know you've got, maybe you can also just start and people can come in late, whatever.